You've likely contemplated getting a piercing at some point in your life, but how about 3,000 piercings per minute? To your surprise, you probably have, because that's exactly what getting a tattoo is. Being informed about tattoos is important because it's likely very personal to a lot of us, meaning that some of us might have tattoos of our own or might know people who do have them, but in general, tattooing and body modifications are just a growing trend amongst our society, and they're only becoming more and more accepted as well. I personally feel entitled to talk about this subject because I have a lot of tattoos myself. Obviously, I've gone through the process of getting physically tattooed. I also used to work at a tattoo shop a few years back, so I know a lot about the different styles and the history and things that people need to know before they go through the procedure. So with that being said, I'm going to shed some light on a few of the major topics revolving around tattooing, which would be the history of tattooing, the different styles of tattooing, and the pros and cons of getting a tattoo. So the origins of tattooing. A lot of people think that the origins, or like the earliest evidence of tattoo markings found on bodies, were actually in the ancient Egyptians, but the earliest evidence of tattoo markings being found on somebody is actually ink markings found on an Iceman discovered along the Austrian-Italian border, and this is about 1,000 years before they were found on ancient Egyptians. The history of tattooing in America actually began around the late 19th century. The first tattoo shop in America was opened by Mark Hildebrandt in 1846, and a lot of his clients were soldiers or sailors, and that's because since tattooing wasn't really a thing in America at that time, soldiers and sailors would get tattooed overseas, and then they kind of normalized the idea when they returned. Or not normalized, more like popularized. But tattooing was mainly popularized during the World War II era by artists such as Sailor Jerry. Understanding the history of body art allows us to make connections with the different styles that emerged during those historical periods. So kind of going back to talking about Sailor Jerry popularized the traditional tattoo. So a lot of us, when we think of tattoos, we think about like very iconic designs such as anchors, pinup girls, roses, ships, kind of stuff like that. That would be considered like traditional tattoos. We don't see a lot of like landscapes with that kind of style. It's mostly just like closed designs. Some different characteristics with this style also include bold black outlines, obviously vintage aesthetic, and vibrant colors. Another popular type of tattoo would include tribal tattoos, and tribal tattoos are obviously derived from tribal art. So when I think of tribal tattoos, I think of like ancient temples and the different types of inscriptions and art and markings that would be along the walls of ancient temples, and basically it would be that in the form of a tattoo. Some other things that characterize the style of tattoo would be thick black lines. They're usually non-dimensional, meaning that they don't have any shading, and they have more geometric or abstract patterns. So now that we know about the history and different styles of tattooing, let's dive into some of the factors to take into consideration before going through the procedure. There's only really one main pro to getting tattooed, and it would just be the fact that it's just a form of self-expression. So it's no different than getting your hair cut or getting a piercing or like dyeing your hair. Basically, it's just to make yourself happy. And this itself can outweigh all of the cons. And there is a list of cons. So mainly it can affect your job opportunities. A lot of employers don't want to hire people who are tattooed, but it also kind of depends on what you have tattooed on your body. It can be painful. Some areas are more painful than others. You need maintenance, so some tattoos need to be touched up depending on where you get them, and they can be expensive. This is the really big one because it usually depends on how long it takes and the artist, and there's a lot of different factors that contribute to the cost. They also can obscure with age because your skin gets old. So now that you've gotten some insight on the different aspects of body art, you can take them into consideration when thinking about your next tattoo. Understanding the history of body art teaches us the origins of the art form, and once we know about the origins of the art form, the development of the styles begin to make a little bit more sense to us. And when we're knowledgeable about both the history and the styles of the art form, we can make more informed decisions about whether or not that might be something that would interest us on a personal level. And although there are many drawbacks to this practice, such as getting your skin punctured 3,000 times per minute, I know that many people still choose to go through this procedure for beautiful art.